Welcome back to the podcast, friend. I'm your host, Kirsten Parker. I'm your decision coach for the episode, and I have just been playing with the different settings on my ring light, and I'm recording this much earlier than I usually do in the day. It's actually still dark out, and I'm finding that my options are dark, creepy shadow, or pale ghost. So that's what I went with. If you're watching on YouTube, uh, I don't know. I might be sorry. I can't tell yet. I'm actually about to get on a plane. For those I haven't shared this with yet, my husband, who is a camera operator, has been filming a show for Amazon Prime in Budapest, Hungary, for the past month and a half now. What is time? And he's going to be there for 4 months total. But I'm going to visit. And really, I'm going to celebrate my 40th birthday. You can't fly directly into Budapest. You have to take little connector flights. So I figured, being the resourceful, efficient decision maker that I am, I might as well just fly to Italy, which is my favorite place on the entire planet. And he could meet me there on his day off. And we'll do my birthday there. And then we'll hop on over to Budapest for him to go back to work. So I will have much to report back on after spending an entire week at Lake Como, which I've never done before. And I can't wait. Now, what does this have to do with our topic of the day? Actually, quite a lot. I have a tendency to record these episodes the week before they air. But for this time off, which since I'm going to be gone for a significant chunk of time, I wanted to have the podcast on autopilot. What I thought would be really useful and fun for both of us is to have some more practical talks, really look at what do a lot of the concepts that we talk about in the Decision Masters world look like in real life? How do they show up in your everyday decisions? And how does that trickle up into your bigger overall life decisions? So, capping off our series on self compassion, we're going to talk today about how self compassion looks and feels and shows up in everyday too big decisions. And why I say everything I'm sharing with you has something to do with that is because all of my plans for recording these episodes were made in the spirit of absolute self compassion, not hustle, self torture, and unquestioned obligations. I'm really taking a self compassionate approach, which means to review quickly what we've been talking about over the past few episodes, how you think and think about and talk to yourself and act with regards to your suffering. How do you attempt to alleviate your own suffering? So, this is the first example I'm going to give you. I'm going to start with my real time week. And without giving away any personal information, we're just going to give a bunch of examples of my badass clients making decisions with self compassion. Sound good? So, everyday decisions. What's an everyday decision that a lot of us face all the time? Deciding what to do next or deciding how to set up your day. What got a little bit of stress? What self compassion has looked like for me in this decision making process is constantly questioning my assumption about what has to happen and how it has to happen. And not from the perspective that, well, you already messed everything up. So what do we have to compromise on or sacrifice? Really from that empowered place of, wait a minute, that's right. I forgot for a second I'm in charge. Let me look at the plans that I plan to follow and make sure I like them. Make sure they're current. Make sure, even though if they sounded good and important 4 days ago, that I give myself a chance to update them if things have changed. So, deciding what to do next or how to set up your day can be done with lots of self compassion. And I think you notice when it's not, when you just keep pushing yourself, when you've had 5 meetings in a row and you go to think, okay, well, what other work has to get done tonight without even acknowledging that little bit of suffering that you're in. Oh, wait, I haven't had water in 6 hours. Might that be a problem? Being willing to question the assumption that you should just work until you're spent or get everything on your list done. Very self compassionate. Another thing I did this week that is a good example from me, and then I'll move on to my client stories, but I did something silly. I was in a total brain fog moment. I can't remember what it was. So that's that tells you. But it was kind of like the time earlier this year. I was sitting here at my desk, drinking my coffee, and at some point I saw something floating in it. And I was like, ruh-roh. That's never good. And I had found out at some point I poured cereal into my coffee. Couldn't tell you when. I just was that brain foggy. And we have these moments in our lives, right? I mean, please tell me you do. Going as far as putting cereal in coffee, but whatever I did recently this week where I was like, well, that was strange. That wasn't what I meant to do, whatever it was. These are opportunities to think and talk with self compassion. And I swear, it sounds so silly and small, but think about how you're already thinking and talking in those moments. If you're super nice to yourself and laugh it off, brava, go on with your bad self. If you're more inclined to call out your mistake, make fun of yourself in a not so nice way, call yourself names. We have to stop downplaying the impact that that has. I would really want you to imagine if there was a real, actual person following you around all day, saying some of the stuff you say to yourself out loud to you. Even in a moment of like, wow, we are as tired as we are, or as affected as we are by this stressful thing that we are so distracted in the moment that there's cereal in our coffee now. That's actually an opportunity for a big self-compassion moment to just recognize, dang, I might be more tired than I'm giving myself credit for, or letting myself realize, or I might be more affected by that thing that I think I should be over, or maybe I thought I didn't care about anymore. It's meeting yourself in the moment, acknowledging a little bit of suffering, and it's not leaning into any instincts to call ourselves names, judge ourselves, and compare ourselves to some perfect alternate universe version of ourselves, which is not necessary. Okay, so what about when you've done something public and are feeling self-conscious? So something at work or something in your social group, whatever. And maybe you have a little bit of a vulnerability hangover. You're feeling a little raw. I had a client who was working with really big time sports teams. She had to talk to the rooms full of big wigs that were often men. And she noticed an instinct to be really self critical after every single meeting. What she started doing was just planning on having self compassion after those meetings. And what that sounded and looked like real time was getting out of the meeting, her noticing these thoughts that bubbling up of, like, wanting to go into self-critical roller coaster land, and noticing that out loud, being like, "Okay, I see the thoughts that wanna go down the spiral of what I did wrong. I don't need to do that right now. I'm actually just alive. It's okay that we're feeling kinda raw. Maybe I don't need to think about anything right now. Maybe we'll evaluate it later, and okay, good job. We did it. On to the next. Let's operate a moving vehicle now." That's what self-compassion looked like in that moment. It wasn't a pity party. It wasn't a breakdown. It wasn't a sob fest. It was a simple, mindful moment where she gave herself the option of how to respond to an instinct to be probably unhelpfully self-critical. We talked about how self-compassion can come up when you're deciding what to do next, especially if you are super spent. What about when you're deciding what to do next when you had a plan that you actually were really committed to and excited about, and a fire comes up? So, in Accountability April, which is the first 30-day accountability coaching program that I ran this year, which was so much fun that we turned it into a club. So check the show notes because you can now join the Alignment and Accountability Club for 30 days of coaching and focus and guidance at a time. So much fun. Inside that group, we noticed a theme that people really wanted to commit to something and follow through on a plan. And there was this annoying thing that kept happening where, like, life would come up and responsibilities would ask for their attention and people would need them to do stuff. Ugh. So self compassion actually showed up in a lot of those decisions too about how to handle these so called fires, how to respond to a moment of something asking for your attention, demanding slash requesting slash expecting that you change your agenda and your priorities. And this is where a little bit of the active flavor of self compassion showed up in this everyday decision. Who doesn't have fires and surprises come up like every other day? So, one client in particular really rooted into being fiercely self compassionate. Remember, the three functions of fierce self compassion are to protect, to provide for your needs, and to motivate change. And when you really want to do something, when you really want to give your time and energy and your precious resources to something that other things or other people keep asking you to deprioritize, whether they mean to or not, it is fiercely self compassionate to own that time. What this client did in particular was adopt this question that became very useful, which was, can the fire wait? Okay, this thing has come up. My instincts are telling me, don't do the thing you were going to do. That doesn't deserve your time. That's not a top priority. Put it off for later. But as we know, once we get into the pattern of putting things off for later, that becomes very acceptable and becomes the norm. That is how self compassion showed up in that everyday decision for this person and for actually a lot of people who I was working with in the past couple months. The fiercely self compassionate decision to protect your priority. Let's do another example of deciding how to handle your schedule and your calendar. So, what about when you have an overall tendency to get spent? When you're in a habit, maybe it's a season, maybe it's just the way things always have been, maybe it's the culture of your workplace, maybe it's your own internal pace, but you're in a habit of always getting to 0%. You just push so hard, most, if not all days, and you're regularly just draining your battery, draining your brain power. I had a client who was noticing he was in this situation. Somehow, at the end of most days, he would end up being like, I just had 6 meetings in a row. My brain is made of mush. And what even is happening? I'm clearly paraphrasing. My clients don't actually talk like I talk most of the time. Brain mush. So I want to share the very self-compassionate approach to his decision dealing with that calendar situation because he's running a company. He can't just say, I'm not going to go to any meetings forever anymore. Well, he could because he has full agency over his life. It wasn't going to be in his best interest to just say, no more meetings. What he did do was approach the situation from self compassion, which I do not think we named out loud. That's the fun of self compassion, you guys. It gets to be sneaky and make your entire life a million times better. And you don't have to really try that hard to identify when do I need self compassion. So much fun. I mean, I make it easier. So if it feels hard, that's okay and normal. And we should work together because I'm really good at making it easy. So this client's self-compassionate response to this schedule conundrum was giving himself more breathing breaks. Not like breaks in his schedule, because sometimes, like we said, it was jam-packed, but more breaks from wherever his attention was going to breathing oxygen. Y'all, do we need to do an episode on how your brain functions optimally? Probably. If you are shallow breathing all day, if you are never giving your brain and body a chance to rest, it's like you're unplugging your phone, using it all day long, draining the battery to 7%. Half your apps are shutting down. You're going into extreme power saver mode. You have to take the entire next day to recharge. Oh, wait, you have 17 meetings in a row tomorrow. What's the plan there? We got to plug the battery in more often. And it's really easy to feel like we can't. It's really easy to feel like I'm not good at breathing or it doesn't work for me or I'm never going to remember that. And it's just excuses said with tough love, said with complete compassion and no judgment. They're just excuses that we make to stay in the familiar patterns that we're in. If you're not used to breathing and paying attention to your physiological state and thinking that it's important to regularly regulate your nervous system throughout your day, you're going to find excuses not to. Fine, we all do it. That's what self compassion looked like for this client in that everyday decision. He just started breathing more intentionally in between meetings. I gave him a breathing technique that I'm trained in from the HeartMath Institute. It's not complicated, it's not fancy, it's just really effective. And it made a massive impact on his clarity of thinking, on his energy, on his presence, on his physical state by the end of the day. Holy moly. Those are some real life examples of how fierce and tender self compassion can show up in these kind of quote unquote everyday decisions. One of the bigger ones. What about choosing what you're going to do with your next career move? Have a lot of clients making decisions every day in the direction of their overall career choices. And we have some really great examples of the 3 different functions of fierce self-compassion. So one client is in an industry where there are a lot of norms and expectations. And she ain't having it anymore. She's not super aligned with the way this industry sets people up to operate. Not really aligned for her anymore. And she's very aware of that. She's very aware of what her needs and wants are going forward. And she's giving herself a lot of permission for that to be okay instead of resigning herself to, well, it is what it is. What are you going to do? I have to work the way the industry wants me to work. So self compassion is showing up in her decision process, making her next career move in a very fierce way. She is intentionally providing for her needs by not saying yes to any misaligned opportunities, not making any assumptions about what is and isn't available to her. She's really coming at this decision from a fiercely compassionate perspective with the decision already made that providing for my needs matters and is a priority. There's another client who was making a series of choices that ultimately added up to a career choice, right? It's never just one single decision you make one day, these career move choices. There was a lot of resistance showing up when it came to considering what she was going to do and what she was going to take on next because she was coming from burnout habits and she really didn't want to get herself into a familiar situation where too much would be asked of her and not enough support would be given and she would run herself into the ground. She was approaching those decisions with fierce self compassion, protecting her resources, her energy, her mental health, her physical health, her ideal way of life that she decided she was entitled to. So, even in approaching her career choices, while she looked at what would that mean for me? How would I act in that situation? What boundaries would I need in this situation for it to be okay? Her perspective was fiercely self compassionate. See how that shows up there? Another client, what's the third function of fierce self-compassion? Can you remember? We already did providing and protecting. The third function was motivating self-honoring change. I had a client who's in a situation that I hear a lot. I'm not happy where I am, and I don't want to stay here forever, but I am committed to staying here for now for these reasons that I like, and I'm going to go seek my next chapter elsewhere. So, what do we do when we're in this situation where we're not happy where we are? We know we don't want to stay there. We know we don't want to put our full life force into transforming this position because we do want to go in a different direction. But meanwhile, we're still showing up to this job every day. Well, same thing. My client showed up to this decision fiercely self compassionate, motivated to change that situation because ultimately he decided this everyday experience in this job that I know I'm leaving actually counts. It's actually affecting how I show up in my job search. It's actually affecting how I feel in my life and about myself. And it's worth improving this situation so that I feel better, so that it feels better, even though I know I'm not going to stay here for the sake of my future self and for the sake of not putting up with my life until some indefinite later on date when it gets better, hopefully. Fierce self compassion motivated him to be proactive about changing some of the ways he was doing things, talking to his team about doing things differently, asking for things to change, not just hunkering down inside the status quo. Okay, and finally, some little everyday decisions that turn into big decisions with big impact. There are a couple common themes I saw with some other clients I was looking at when I was thinking through all of this that were great examples of fierce self compassion. How common is it that we are put in a position to decide how to respond to someone else's needs or expectations? I was thinking about my clients with kids who are moving, with in laws who ask a lot of attention, with family members with certain preferences. One client who was looking at, okay, my family is expecting a lot of me, and I also want to show up for them because I love them. And I don't want to just be at everyone's beck and call and feel taken advantage of and not leave time or energy in my own life for myself. So fierce self compassion showed up in her little decisions about when to answer the phone and when not to, what she was going to do to help or not help kid who was moving, as opposed to just accepting that, well, everyone needs things from me and that's my lot in life and I owe it to everybody and not questioning that. There's a little bit of element of suffering in that. Can you see? Where you feel like your needs and your time and your resources and your preferences are a little bit deprioritized. And she didn't want to feel that way. So fierce self compassion showed up, protect her resources and to protect the relationships she wanted to have with people because she wanted to have loving, mutually respectful relationships and not feel taken advantage of. I have a couple other clients who love connecting with friends, connecting with people, kind of being on the go, getting up and going to do what they want and see who they want. And their spouses are just a little more rigid than that. They have different preferences of how life would regularly look. And self compassion, again, showed up in their decisions about how do I respond to this person's preference? How do I respond to my own desires? It's easy to convince ourselves, I can't make this decision, or this is unavailable to me because so and so would get mad, or they would never go for that, or fill in the blank. And once we recognize statements like that, where you're missing a little bit of your agency and there's some negative emotion about what you can and can't decide or what you are or aren't doing, that's a little signal that there's a little suffering. And that opens the door wide for self compassion to come in and influence your decision. It doesn't have to make it completely for you, but it might just make the difference in you giving up on the trip of a lifetime that you would otherwise love to do and be so happy and confident and celebratory about versus resigning yourself to the idea that that's unavailable or you can't. So I hope it's been fun getting a peek into these real life situations where self-compassion can show up and look at what really happens when it is a regular presence in your life, when it regularly influences your decision. And I hope you try it soon. If you are ready to work together to make all of these habits your norm and your reality, I can't wait to work with you. Check the show notes for how we can work together short or long term and privately or in a group. I hope you have a fabulous weekend. I'll see you next week. Hey, want to find out your decision style? Obviously, go take the decision style quiz. It's in the show notes and at kirstenparker.com/quiz. We all have our style when it comes to making decisions, but do you know how to use your default way of thinking to your advantage? Or do you mainly get stuck in the most annoying parts of overthinking and people pleasing? The decision style quiz has your answers, my friend. Take it right now at kirstenparker.com/quiz.